Hey everyone! The 45th Chess Olympiad finished a few weeks ago in Budapest, Hungary, and the Indian team won quite convincingly with a very large margin of 4 points. So in today's video I want to analyze some of the nicest moments that India had throughout the different rounds, and I'm gonna start with this position in the third round. And playing as white we have Arjun Erigaisi. Spoiler alert, Erigaisi and Gukesh took most of the credit from India's win, so I'm going to focus on games played by these two players. So in this position, Erigaisi, playing as white, has a great position because white's pieces are ready to attack black's king on the king side. Even the queen is eyeing the important h6 square, and Erigaisi found a very concrete way to finish the game. So here he played the move d5, activating the bishop on c3, trying to create threats against the king, and here black took on d5. The main point is that after black trades, white takes with the queen, and there's way too much pressure on g7. There's also an idea to take on h6 because the pawn on g7 is pinned, so black is not going to last long here. So black tried taking on d5, and now Erigaisi went e5, very forcing, attacking the bishop, and after black moved the bishop, now e6 is very strong. There are threats on g7 and on f7. There's also an idea to take on h6 now that the pawn on g7 is pinned. So black tried rook to f6, and here taking on f6 was good enough, but Erigaisi found a more brutal way to finish the game. Here he went e7, attacking the queen. The idea is to drive the queen away from this diagonal, because after queen takes, here comes the very pretty queen sacrifice after queen takes, g takes, and rook takes. The rook on f6 is pinned, so queen to h7 is the only legal move, and after rook takes, we get this very pretty checkmate. In the next position, we also have Erigaisi playing for India. In this case, he's playing as black. Black's position looks great because black has pressure on c3, black also has the a file, c4 is weak, but whenever there's a concrete way to finish the game off, Erigaisi will probably find it, and here he went knight takes c3, sacrificing the knight, and after rook takes, bishop takes d4, this gives a check, and it also attacks the rook, so white took on d4. If white tries rook to e3, which is a move that might come to mind, here black has a few options, but the move rook to a1 is particularly nice, pinning the queen, and after knight takes, bishop takes, black is going to collect more material. So instead white played knight takes d4, and now we see black's idea. Now that the knight is not controlling a1, now rook to a1 will pin the queen, and will win more material because this knight on d4 is pinned. So white's pieces are overloaded. For example, after queen takes and queen takes, black is going to give a check and collect the rook on c3. Now, something that really amazed me about the Indian team is that despite being very young, they are very good players in technical positions and whenever they play the endings. And this game from the 6th round is a very good example of that. So here black is putting pressure on white, black's king is a lot more active, but here Erigaisi doesn't rush. A move like bishop to e7 might come to mind, but this would allow some knight to e5 ideas. So here he played the very annoying h5. So in a way asking white to make a move. If white goes f4, this would weaken the e4 square, so now the king might try to invade. In the game white went g4, that we'll analyze shortly, but let's evaluate other alternatives. The king on c2 has to keep an eye on b3, because black wants to collect the a3 pawn, and if the knight moves to b2, then black will simply trade and then go for this king and pawn ending, where black is going to collect white's pawns. White actually defended quite well, and here he played a very interesting idea of g4. Sacrificing a pawn, after black took on g4, and then black got the h4 pawn, but now after knight to e5 we get this fork, but Erigaisi saw a lot further, and here he went king to d5, and after knight takes f7, here he went bishop to f6, and now the knight is running out of squares. So in the game white tried king to d3, if white goes g5, then after king to e6, the knight is lacking good squares and black will win material, and after king to d3, king to e6, knight to h6 is the only square for the knight, and after bishop to g5, this knight is going to get dropped. So if white goes knight to g8, after king to f7, black will win the knight, but white tried another very interesting idea. Here he went knight to f5, just giving the knight, and after g takes and g takes, Erigaisi is strong enough not to fall for king takes. Here he went king to d5, and white resigned because black will end up capturing this pawn a3, and the pawn f5 is controlled by the bishop. But the point was that after king takes f5, white would play king to c4 and then pick up this pawn a4 and get a draw. Now another great star from India's team was Gukesh, who played on the first board, and in the 7th round he scored a decisive victory against China, and besides being very young, he's a very strong ending player, and this game is an example of that. Here we have a complicated position. White should normally be the one pushing, with 2 knights against rook, so here Gukesh tried the move f5, pushing the pass pawn. Black did the same, h5, and after knight to c3, h4, knight to e4 and king to d7, knight to e5, Gukesh is going forward, but on the other hand, this pawn h4 is advanced, so white has to be very concrete in these positions, and after king to d8 and f5, here black had a way to defend, which was very hard to see, which was the move rook to d1, planning to have some rook to d5 ideas, attacking the knight on e5, which is supporting the advance of the f pawn. But it is hard to blame black for playing the move h3 with just a few seconds on the clock. This looks very natural, and here Gukesh went f7, and after rook to f1, this pawn seems to be margin, but Gukesh saw a lot in advance, and here he went knight to g5, attacking the pawn, and after h2, knight g to f3. And the main idea is that if black promotes, white will promote, and in this position, white is given a check first and is going to attack with the 2 knights. This position is even a forced checkmate for white, amazingly. So even though black didn't have enough time to calculate everything, he correctly evaluated that position would be losing, so here he tried king to e7 to stop the pawn, but now white will collect the pawn h2, and after rook to a1, white brought the knight to g4. White's position is winning, but Gukesh is going to be very accurate. Here after black gave a check before capturing the pawn, king to d2 is a very strong move, as we'll see. After black took on a4, knight to h6 was the idea that Gukesh had, and now they see the point of the king on d2 and not on e2. Here the move rook to e4 would give a fork, but instead now white is going to promote the pawn after knight to g6. Here black tried rook to a2. If the rook goes to f4 after knight to g6, we get a fork. Black could give a check and then go rook to d8, but after knight to c6 we get another fork. So this was pretty perfect play by Gukesh. And after rook to a2, the king is marching forward, king to e3, rook to a3, and king to e4. In this position, black decided to resign, not waiting for the move knight to g6. In the next position, Gukesh is playing as white against none other than Fabiano Caruana, the world number 2, in the match against the USA, and this was a decisive victory by Gukesh, and the way that he put pressure on Caruana was quite instructive. Now this position should be balanced with correct play, but it is definitely easier to play as white. Black's pieces are not well coordinated, the knight on e7 is pinned. Here Gukesh tried the move a4, inviting black to take on a4, which was possible, but it definitely looks scary, because here the move rook to f7 is attacking black's pieces, but here after the move rook to g8, black is having enough counterplay with the pawn on d2. But taking the pawn a4 feels a bit scary, allowing rook to f7. Instead Caruana went queen to c6, which covers the rook. Now the knight can move away. There are also ideas to go queen to g6, but the main drawback of this move is that now queen to d4 is possible, attacking this very strong pass pawn on d2. And here Caruana followed this idea of queen to g6. Here the move knight to g6 was the best try. If white takes on d2, then knight to e5 would try to block the e-pawn. Although here the move bishop to f5 is annoying, pinning the knight on g6, this was a better try for black, because after queen to g6, Gukesh has this very strong move rook to f4, just covering the 4th rank with the rook. Now white is ready to collect the pawn on d2. Black tried queen to g5, but after h4, this will drive the queen back to g6, and after queen takes, white already got an extra pawn and the better position, and in fact after rook to b8, queen to d7, h5, bishop to e6, Gukesh won another pawn after rook to b6, bishop to f7, queen to d6. We got a trade of queens, and after bishop takes h5, white got another pawn, and Caruana resigned just a few moves later. And before I move on to the last position, if you want to seriously improve at chess, I have a free course that will provide you with a training plan for that, so feel free to check the link in the description. So the last position is another great example of Gukesh play. It really feels like playing against a machine when he's at his best. Here in this position, Gukesh is playing as black. He's a pawn down, but he has 2 bishops as compensation. These 2 knights don't have very good squares to go, and the pawn on c6 might look threatening at first sight, but on the other hand, black has great control of the c8 square, so it is going to be very hard to promote it. But here Gukesh played a very instructive idea. Most of black's pieces look very active, but not the rook on a8. So here he found this idea of rook to a5, with the idea to bring the rook to b5 after knight to e1. So now there's pressure on this pawn on b2. White tried knight to d3. Here Gukesh could have taken on d3 and then take on b2. He would even have the advantage there, but the Indian team is very ambitious. Gukesh wants even more. Here he goes d4, creating more complications. And after white took on d4, and Gukesh took back, rook to c2. Now the e-file has been opened, so Gukesh goes rook to e8, creating pressure on the king on e2, which is defending the knight on d3. So amazingly, white's position is already desperate. After knight to f3, rook to b3, in every move Gukesh increases the pressure. White went knight f to e1, and after bishop to b4, giving a check, king to f1, Gukesh found a forcing way to win material. Bishop takes e1, white has to take with the knight, otherwise black would capture on d3. And after knight takes, here Gukesh won an exchange. After bishop takes, knight takes, and after d3, knight to e3, and rook takes b2, black has an extra exchange and a much better position, which Gukesh managed to convert into a win. So this was an amazing win by India, and in some of these wins, it really feels like they are playing against much weaker opponents. Thanks a lot for watching, and I'll see you in the next video.